Hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In today's MTPredictor video, I'd like to look at how the US E-minis unfolded on Friday, which was the 7th of August. In particular, I'd like to take a look at the NQ because we had some great trade setups coming in here. Although these were against a red STF, the more experienced users would have gone to the higher time frame and looked for higher degree support and resistance zones on the higher time frame charts. So let's take a look at that and show you what we do. So this is a 3-minute chart. So the higher frame chart would be a 15-minute chart. So let's go out to the 15-minute chart and see what we've got. Well, I want to zoom out a bit because if we place our DP on from this little last pivot low, you can see we were beyond that DP there, therefore that was breached. But if we zoom out a little bit, we can see that we actually had another low back here, another major low. Can you see that? Another major low there on the 28th of July. So if we right mouse click there, place the decision point on, you can see how that came out here and gave support that basically nailed the very low of the day for us yesterday. Can you see that? I'll just zoom in a bit so it's just a little bit easier to see. There we go. There's our support zone coming in, nailing the low of the day. So let's take that one off so we don't get a bit confused. And remember, these DP levels are on the chart in advance. So before the market even got there, before it even made the lows, and in fact actually that decision point level could have been on our chart for basically days. So it could have been there for days and days and days and days, even before we even got any data coming in for yesterday. So it just shows you they're leading indicators there in advance. I also want to have a look at the decline down from the 5th of August high, because if we right mouse click over the low, do Elliott wave intermediate, can you see how also this was a nice 5-wave sequence starting at a good high. We had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the low right at the minimum wave 5 WPT. So can you all see how on the higher time frame chart coming in at around 11:45, so just before 12 o'clock, we had confirmation on the 15-minute chart that we were at larger degree support. We also had a good pattern there. Therefore, we're anticipating the larger degree trend to change and the larger degree trend to be up, and therefore we'll be looking for buy signals on the shorter term charts. But you see how this is all done in advance, so you knew after 12 o'clock to be looking for buy setups. We're not in reaction mode, we're in preparation mode. So let's go back to our 3-minute chart, and there you can see our 15-minute DP catching the low very nicely. Then a little bit later at, what was that, 1:30, so that's an hour and a half later, we had a good buy setup. In fact, we had another one here just over an hour later at 13:06. So let's place the analysis on this first buy setup. Remember, we use correct position sizing to keep our initial risk small under control. Now this one would have been a losing trade. You'd have just got taken in by a tick, then stopped out again. Remember, losses can do and will happen. They always do. Professional traders don't worry about that. They worry about keeping the losses small, and that's what we do with our position sizing. So this would have kept the loss at less than 2% of a sample $20,000 account, which we've got set up here. So we call that a -1R risk. Let's just clear the chart off. A bit later on, we had another TS3 buy setup came in here. Let's place the analysis on the blue buy bar, and this time it rallied quite nicely, as you can see. Now, what's special about this particular trade setup? Well, rather than looking to come out at the first target here, this would be what we call a holy grail trade setup. There are lots of videos describing this in other parts of the website, but basically we are looking for this low here to be what we call an important low. The reason we define it as an important low is because it comes in at higher time frame support, which is, as we've seen, that was the 15-minute decision point level there. So the initial move of an important low in Elliott wave terms would be considered a wave 1. The initial correction after a wave 1 would be a wave 2. Ideally, a wave 2 should subdivide into a minor ABC, which is exactly what we had here. This is the definition of our TS3 setup. Therefore, after a wave 2, we're anticipating a strong wave 3. Therefore, the target we're looking for is the typical wave 3 WPT. So grab our risk reward, we come up to here, and we say, actually, rather than looking for a a smaller profit at this first target, we're actually looking for the market to rally right up to this level. Now remember, this is actually on the chart at the time. So if I just place our training mode on and I come back to this bar here, this is how it would have looked at the time. There's the analysis on. Grab the risk reward, come up to the typical wave 3 WPT. So you knew at the outset that that was our initial risk, i.e. a 1 hour risk. The potential profit was 6 times greater than the initial risk. In other words, 6 times greater than our loss we had earlier. That's the beauty of these trade setups, is because we're coming in right at the end of the wave 2, we're looking to then catch the wave 3, which typically is the strongest and longest wave in a completed Elliott wave sequence. The profits are always going to be much larger than the initial risk. This is why I've nicknamed it the Holy Grail trade setup, not because necessarily it's a high percentage winning trade. In other words, it's not right a high percentage of the time, but when it is right, the profit is much greater than the initial risk, or much greater than the losses. That's why I think it's one of the best trades in the book, because this is the best place to buy to get the largest profit, because you're in the biggest swing. Let's turn training mode off, and you can see the market rallies up here quite nicely. So you could either take profit at that level and say thank you very much, or you could see that the STF has gone beyond its strength band and then look to run with the ATR stop, which means you'd have held it into close and had a slightly larger profit at 7.7R. But even at 6R profit, that's a very nice trade there. And the beauty of this is because that 6R was 6 times greater than the initial risk, you've had one losing trade, only minus 1R. The next trade is a plus 6R profit, so a very nice trade. And this was all set up because on our 15-minute chart we'd done our work earlier in the day, and on our 15-minute chart we'd had our decision point on the chart there already, so we knew that was an area of where support was likely. We also knew that we were coming down in a potential 5-wave sequence. We had our wave 5 WPT on the chart there as well. Remember, rather than just using our Elliott wave tool, you can also use our WPT tool to place these WPTs on the chart manually in advance. So again, they're there before the market gets there. So you knew that that was an area of where large degree support was coming in. Once it came in, the market reversed. You then knew you were looking for long trades, and in particular, you knew you were looking for Holy Grail trade setups, because that was the coming off the large degree support after initial rally, an ABC correction into a wave 2, that's the initial correction. You're then looking for a strong wave 3 kind of rally. So this is a great example of the MTPredictor Holy Grail trade setup, and actually was the reason MTPredictor was actually designed in the first place, basically 14 years ago. And hopefully you can see why I've nicknamed it the Holy Grail, and why it's such a good trade setup, because the profits are much larger than the initial risks. And this is what you want to be a successful trader, is when money goes into your account, it goes in big lumps, in other words big profits, and when you're wrong, the losses are only small and you only have small amounts coming out of your account. That's the best way to increase your account over the long term. Have trade setups where the profits are much larger than the initial risks, and that is the whole ethos of the Holy Grail trade setup. And as you can see, an absolutely perfect example we had there on Friday the 7th of August on the NQ.